And introducing now Menelaos Karamaghiolis, who joins us here at E.A.T from Athens. I wanted, before introducing him, make a small tribute to Robert Whitman, the great, amazing, legendary performance artist who died earlier this week. He was actually the co-founder of E.A.T, of experiments in art and technology. Because as many of you know, there are two E.A.Ts in the world. They are the one and only Engadin art talks. But there was also in the 1960s the experiments of art and technology, which Billy Kluwer co-founded with Whitman, and many artists were involved. And it's a very relevant initiative in relation also to the topic here, because it's all about bringing artists into society. And experiments in art and technology worked at the time with Bell, the leading tech company, and brought artists into this context. It was kind of at the same time as in the UK, you had John Latham and Barbara Stevini doing Artist Placement Group, which was an initiative about actually giving agency to artists to bring them outside the museum, to bring artists into society. And Latham and Stevini said that every corporation, every government should have either an artist in residence or, even better, an artist on the board. And I think the idea is important. It was an utopic idea at the time, but today an idea which should be realized, because every structure needs to pivot, and nobody is better at pivoting than artists. And we have so many examples how this worked. For example, when a city like Manchester puts an artist as their cultural director with Peter Saville, we can see over the last 15 years what happened in Manchester, the Manchester International Festival, the factory, all of that, through the vision of an artist. So E.A.T and APG, I think, are two really essential initiatives if you think about, what art can do in society. I also want to remember Robert Whitman, because I had a marvelous encounter with him last month in December, where he talked about the importance of togetherness. He talked about the fact that we need to go beyond the fear of pooling knowledge, and that if we want to really address the big topics of the 21st century, ecological topics, social topics, political topics, that we need to kind of rethink about collective work, that another world, to come back to this morning, is possible if you somehow work together. And he left me that winter day in upstate New York, when I left his studio, with that thought, which I thought was very interesting. He said, why are we all visiting, biennales and group shows, where it's all about the names, it's all about who did what. We should remove all the labels, and we should think, what we could do together. And I think it's an interesting, very interesting thought. And of course, this idea of togetherness is also present in another pioneer's work, and we heard this morning in Russia's wonderful talk and the wonderful conversation with Koyo afterwards about Issa Samb. And similarly to Robert Whitman, Issa Samb is a great pioneer of creating such collective processes. Agita Laboratoire, his collective, was a visionary project. We worked with them in 1999, and he brought what actually Russia referred to as this courtyard of convening. He brought that to Manchester. So he basically, to Antwerp and for Laboratorium. And he said it's not possible to do events. We need to do more than events. We need to go beyond event culture and think about longer duration. So they came for a month. And I think that that's a super important thing right now, and brings us right away to Menelaos, is to kind of work on longer durational projects. This idea how we can go beyond the short-termism in our society. And that's, I think, why now so many artists are all of a sudden interested in going beyond the temporality of conferences, of exhibitions, and think about really longer durational things. We see that a lot at the Serpentine when we invited Alexandra Daisy Ginsberg. She said rather than a show, she wants to do a garden. So she developed a garden in Kensington Garden where basically the pollinators are at the center. So with AI, a garden was built, which is not for us humans, but for the pollinators. And at the moment, we're working with Inka Shonibare, who started a farm project in Nigeria and combines that farm project with a residency. And that's exactly also the direction of Menelaos' work. And we are so delighted that Menelaos is with us here today. Menelaos is an artist, a filmmaker, who produces fiction films, documentaries, artist films, installation, radio movies, but above all, he is a social sculptor. He works with entire neighborhoods in Athens and beyond, involves them into cinema, gives people agency through film, and really uses film as one can say maybe a toolbox, no, for change. And what is so fascinating is that he is the founder of a project called Døcumatism. It's a group of artists, educators, researchers, and filmmakers who actually aim to find solutions and raise awareness about crucial social issues using the power of cinematography. And, you know, listening to this very, very important, in a way, memory, you know, we heard this morning of Issa Samb. It made me think a lot about Menelaos' practice today. So please give Menelaos a very, very warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. My computer. Thank you a lot. I'm wondering what is the point of those meetings, the word beyond or the word powerlessness. It's very difficult for me to pronounce the word powerlessness. I apologize for spelling it out over and over, unless I manage to deal with it, talking with Hans Ulrich later. He's always supportive to that. Perhaps I find that word difficult because I didn't accept it, or it makes me angry. Maybe with this childish way of pronouncing that word, I secretly feel like I'm invalidating it. Please let me read this short presentation in order to be specific and brief. It took me a long time to come to terms with the meaning of the word powerlessness, but I never quite accepted the word itself, especially in English, which is not the language I use every day and know in depth. In Greek, this word is ambiguous and not at all precise as it is in English, because it contains both the meaning of powerlessness and weakness. In English, it refers only to lack of strength that also extends to lack of authority, something that afflicts us, whether we are victims to it or we exercise it on others. And that is what troubles me with this word that has added two suffixes to power, less and ness. When is power gained or lost, and how? Who is powerless? The one who is forced by the circumstances in which they live, or the one who feels powerless even though they are privileged? I was born and raised in a small provincial town that could not hold my peculiarities nor my dreams. And I mean all these things whose practice and application in life make one feel strong, even they are not. In my teenage years, I seek to be in a big city, Athens, where it is easier to claim the life you want, whether it is the possibility of being an artist or your love choices. Because I was provincial, living alone in Athens, I often felt powerless compared to my peers. I had to make double and triple the effort of others in order to have access to things that they took for granted. Growing up, I managed to love the people I wanted, and most importantly, make movies. Working on moving image, I found an effective way to deal with my personal questions and dilemmas. But cinema and art in Greece have always faced very serious and structural difficulties in order for someone to be able to practice them at will, to make a living out of them, and to find an audience for one's films. I'm trying to describe a constant sense of powerlessness that has obstructed me for most of my life, but at the same time pushed me to find where the real power might lie, and maybe not where it seems obvious. For example, in certain privilege like wealth or authority. I dealt with the constant battle with myself and my difficulties in my country by making films of all lengths and genres, fiction, documentaries, video installation, and radio movies that have as protagonists powerless heroes almost or completely doomed. In order to make these films, I had to seek collaborations and encouragement abroad. Those powerless heroes are the exclusive protagonists in my work after 2009, at the beginning by giving their stories to actors, and later on by starring in the works themselves. Since the start of the crisis that I fear is still going on despite signs to the contrary. Behind us, you see a prisoner in a juvenile prison. The only place he can walk outside his cell is this tiny little courtyard with high walls, with a blind fake football goalpost and wires on the walls. He wouldn't even fly if he could. He can only walk there in the morning for an hour, a few days a week, if the weather is nice. The topic of this discussion today is whether powerlessness can become a strength through art and cinema. My attempt to answer concisely and directly is through images and stories like this one. Moving images that you can watch either in a movie theater, in a gallery or a museum, in your imagination listening to them on the radio, on your mobile phone or wherever you want. They will make you an eyewitness and present to what we don't know or avoid or forget because we can't bear to be reminded of it all the time. I found myself in this prison in 2011 to try something that seemed insane or unnecessary. Provide contemporary art workshops to juvenile prisoners, most of whom already had children, had never been to school, and could not read and write. These workshops initiated an artistic process that became a meaningful and effective alternative school for all of us, and especially for some of these prisoners. They led to a theatrical performance and concerts inside the prison with the participation of well-known artists. They triggered tours of the performance to other prisons, an exhibition of the works made by the prisoners themselves at the National Museum of Contemporary Art in Athens, and a number of different films and works shown at festivals, galleries, museums, and Kunsthallen. More importantly, they were shown in schools, in Romani camps, and in other prisons. That is why the prisoner in this film was able to walk at night. For the first time, he was allowed to leave his cell at night to rehearse the performance that would travel to a women's prison. That night, the other prisoners felt the need to participate actively in an inventive way. Through their windows, behind bars, they set up a party with most of 450 prisoners. All floors of the prison participated, and with them, their teachers and some of the prison guards. You can see some images on the screen behind. At least for one night, everyone forgot the high walls, the confinement, the imprisonment, the condemnation of spending one's whole life in delinquency because circumstances and powerlessness sent them to prison before coming of age. I will never accept that such a thing should happen and last only for one night, and that anyone who became an offender was born that way. It became clear to us and to this prisoner that once someone is given the opportunities, the tools and access to knowledge and art, they have a good chance of escaping the vicious cycle that will lead them back to prison. Something that happens in the case of 98% of the juvenile prisoners. The vicious cycle of delinquency and incarceration is perhaps one of the most difficult forms of powerlessness, along with illness that prohibits or makes moving difficult. In the 10 years I was in and out of those prisons, contemporary art and examples of the work of artists became the starting point for a process that helped powerless prisoners feel that there is hope, supported them in seeking their lost power along with their freedom in a different way than they had done before. They were able to exhibit their works in a contemporary art museum, and the moving image captured this process. Viewers of the films, of those films, that were created in prison, often feel powerless and usually believe that privilege is what brings power. In these films and works, they can see as eyewitnesses how the condemned, perhaps for life heroes, because of powerlessness, claim essential power, perhaps more easily than the privileged, and that art, all forms of art, can drive this process in unpredictable ways. In making these films, full of powerless heroes, I, a director and artist who all my life has felt powerless, in a country that has been powerless for the last 12 years at least, at a time when most people around me confess that they are or feel powerless, found myself in front of stories with heroes who, because they are powerless, managed to find, some of them, the true power to cancel this less and ness and let the word power show its essential meaning, or the one it should have. I'm borrowing the aphorism of an essayist, Rivarol, who suffered in his time during the 18th century and continues to do so today due to those who abuse and misunderstand his work. We never cry so much as in the age of hope. But when we no longer have hope, everything is seen with dry eyes and calm is born out of powerlessness. Let's try to continue this conversation and our lives with the hope, the delusion, or the belief that art can change the world. Thank you. Please.
Thank you so much, Menelaos, for this incredible presentation and for showing us the long durational project of an entire decade. You know, you worked with these prisoners. When we worked on the presentation of your films in different cinemas in London with the Serpentine, we spoke a lot about another long durational project of yours, which is Døcumatism. I cannot pronounce it. Yeah, exactly, Døcumatism, where you work with a group of filmmakers, artists, curators, historians, social workers, researchers, and also educators. And that's the project I referred to in my introduction with this entire neighborhood of Kypseli, where you basically create visibility for a community which has almost no visibility in Greek society. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you collaborate with these many, many artists? When we launched actually the film of Mantia Diawara in Athens, you know, I met many of the artists you work with, and it's a real community you build. So I think it would be great for everyone to hear more about that.
And it's good that they met with Matthias also. Yeah. I would prefer you to speak, because my job is to do images. I left my hometown when I was 14, and I went to a neighborhood which, on the beginning, was a bourgeois neighborhood. But in 10 years, the dream of desperate housewives was very popular in Greece, so most of people left for the new suburbs. And this neighborhood had a lot of available and cheap apartments. And first the Albanian community and then the African diaspora in Greece, they found a lot of available and cheap apartments to live. So for 20 years, no one was coming to our studio, to my place, telling, oh, it's a ghetto, I'm afraid of the black color, etc. And it was horrible in a neighborhood that there is no crime at all. This is the most important thing. So the last 10 years, we started with other artists working in the neighborhood, and mainly through collective community work, we call it the Afro-Greeks, which is a term that has a critical approach by its protagonists. And what was the problem for Athenians? The black color became the weapon, the tool, and the privilege of that neighborhood. What is happening now? Now, when we started, it was just one gallery. Now there are 43 galleries, but they are not expensive galleries. They are cheap studios that artists, they can afford, and they can exhibit their work. And the most important thing, because the first question it comes, that the neighborhood is not gentrified at all. The communities live there along with the artists. I hope it will remain like that. And we all felt that something in Greece, to be an artist, is a hobby. So we felt that perhaps art is something more important and crucial than that.
Another thing which is part of this project with the Afro-Greeks is of course, that you create a whole range of basically appearances and of making this project visible. There is a video installation, but there are also live events, workshops, open discussions, film screenings, community collaborations. And it was so fascinating when we were in Athens last year together. You know, we went to see Terzopoulos, thanks to Simon Fatal, Simon's close friend, and Simon Fatal, of course, will speak here tomorrow morning. And Simon introduced us to the legendary theater director in Greece, Terzopoulos. And he talked about this idea of a theater being a kind of a place of convening in a fragmented world, no? That we, through a theater, can bring people together. But you do this with cinema, not only through screenings in cinemas, but actually bringing cinema into society. Can you explain us a little bit how with this Afro-Greek project you do all these different things? I mean, it is a form of film urbanism, maybe.
Perhaps, or is a practice that we found dealing with difficulties. For example, when we started that project more than 7 years ago, it was not possible to be funded in Greece. And we've created a practice then it was a combination of artists of African diaspora that they could create their own work, they could express themselves in public, and we used moving image as a starting point for those events, or also we were filming and we still film those events, and there is an archive. So what happened that the Afro-Greeks artists, they had a space to express themselves. We've created an amazing archive of 200, for until now, interviews, 3 hours each, which is an attempt to have the history of the African diaspora in Greece on 20th and 21st century as part of the national history and narration. We have already 40-something live events which are filmed and open to the public. We have 100 video installations. Some of them, they were presented in Geneva before Christmas in the exhibition Remember Your House, curated by Andrea Bellini and Grace Nwokye. And some of this is an archive which belongs to the communities and to universities. And now the Afro-Greeks, they continue that. They continue that themselves, and it's an ongoing project that is going on. And also what you see some images behind of demonstrations that the project created in Athens. For example, for George Floyd, it was that period. And because it was COVID, and some people, they create troubles in those demonstrations, and there are conflicts with the police, etc. The Afro-Greeks, they've done some amazing life events as demonstration in front of the parliament. So they forced anyone, even the policemen, to participate and accept it.
Thank you so much. And I think there are so many connections here to what we heard this morning. I mean, Daniel talked about the important really of bringing things together in a world which is falling into pieces. And Koyo talked about this craving for realness, for connection. And I feel very much that that's what you do with your cinema. It's now the moment to open it up for questions or comments for Menelaos. Do we have any questions? Yeah, if we can have the microphone in the back.
Thank you so much for this presentation. It brings me back to this morning, the Caracas example of a community, self-built part of the city, where, and in a certain way, you do the same with the Afro population in Greece, in Athens, that they become very accessible and visible. And I'm wondering if this word powerlessness, which you pointed out already in your introduction, can have another connotation if we turn it around and say what is beyond the powerlessness and what actually gives it a positive connotation would be being vulnerable and allow being vulnerable, which is in English an ability to show the vulnerable, to be vulnerable. And this brings me to the question of this explosion of responsibility from this morning twice, because I think it's not completely true that there is an explosion of responsibility equally in the world. It is very unequal. And the fact that we have now two amazing examples from Caracas and now from Athens, that it's not the gated communities speaking, it is the vulnerable, the marginalized people speaking and doing things. How would that be if countries with power, we are not powerless, do something real? And the example is being given by projects like you describe now, which I'm super happy to hear about.
I have to remark that all the presentations I've seen today, they are somehow curated in a way that they fit each other and they expand the narration of the day, which is very interesting. Usually when I'm sitting somewhere silent hearing, it's a little bit boring. Today I felt it was the opposite, and I had all the time new ideas or arguments, things to criticize or to be inspired. Or I think that this is not successful, as you said. Example, I couldn't speak about success because what is success, and perhaps sometimes failure, is a kind of success. And this is a nightmare, this word. For me, they are exceptions. All these situations, they are exceptions. And it's a way for people that they can't react in order to complain or to feel imprisoned to react. This is what we've done in a small neighborhood in Athens. This I've done this summer, last year. It's Elefsina, it's a city of Athens with a huge ancient history of mysteries, with an amazing archaeological site, which is part of a factory which it's still working. And we've done a project there called Greekis. Greekis are the Greek stray dogs of the area, which mostly of them with 3 legs, half-faced, destroyed, so many illnesses. They are popular for adoptions abroad. And we started working in the area which is environmentally, crucially problematic. And we expanded the project from to stray stories, to people they feel stray, to stray locations. And with the participation of the people, doing something that we didn't know as an exception, as something crazy, as something, let's try an experiment, we've managed to have the participation of the people, of Roma communities, of immigrants that they live in isolated camps in the area. So the point is that let's speak about exceptions. I believe on exceptions.
We can take one very last question. Yeah. And it has to be very short because I'm getting signs that I think we are over time. So one short question and one short.
Menelaos, thank you very much. Last, maybe kind of weird question because I'm amazed by the work, but could it be that showing it here or showing it in places like Serpentine, is it a form of empowerment, or do you just make it consumable for us that these existences exist and we even get kind of used to it and kind of accept the burden of the world on the shoulder of these people, their powerlessness, because it's aesthetic, beautiful, and we go home and we are happy to have been exposed and become more aware, and we do fucking nothing?
You are totally right. And sometimes, or not sometimes, I'm always wondering and I feel guilty and all those things. I can tell you something, that when Hans Ulrich Obrist and Kostas Stassinopoulos did this festival last year in Serpentine, in different places around London, with different films, any kind of films, fiction, documentaries, video installations, the most important thing was the conversations, the conversations after the screenings, and some fights that we had on that, or things that, although they are obvious, we can't think of them. For me, perhaps you are totally right, but the only thing that makes me feel that we can continue on that, it's, for example, some Afro-Greeks artists that they are so isolated in Greece, although they were born in Greece. They've never been to Africa, most of them. They don't have the Greek identity. It's a crazy bureaucratic system that bothers them to have a Greek identity. That means that they are strangers, they can't travel abroad. It's so many problems if you don't have an identity, a legal identity. So through the Serpentine Festival, they met with amazing artists like Yinka Sonibare, like Julian, like Ibrahim Mahama. So they have a straight conversation and they will be part of the residencies in Africa. So can you imagine they couldn't go to Africa because of problems, because it's very expensive, the ticket, and now they can go through art. And also I'm very proud that in the exhibition in Geneva, the community, the Afro-Greek artists, they've made live events like dance performance or a dance battle, which was a dialogue, an artistic dialogue with the street artists of Geneva. So perhaps that is an answer to what to your question, but at the same time, we have to figure every time, every day about this and how can. This was the aim of what I've tried to tell today, that I felt all my life powerless. But I'm an hypocrite because I'm a privilege comparing to other people. So we have to think that, and I think that self-criticism is very important and crucial.
I think there are more questions, but I think we have to do that in the coffee break because I'm getting signs. There's so many more things we could discuss. What was also fascinating is that at the end of the screenings, a student actually came up and said that she felt that she had learned from you how to listen. And that, of course, connects us to the beautiful poem this morning, no? Where Claudia Schiffer told us so many, many versions of listening, zuhören, hinhören. I don't have the full list, but it was very moving. And I just want to end here with a quote from Menelaos. You said, "I will continue to believe that a miracle will happen. I've identified it hidden in the enduring faith and perseverance." Menelaos, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.